Welcome to Inside College Admission, conversations with admission leaders about matters affecting the college-going process. My name is Peter Van Buskirk, and I'm joined today by Lauren Sefton. Lauren is the Senior Associate Director of Admission at Rhodes College and carries some other important credentials as well. She's a recent past president of the Southern Association of College Admission Counseling, and she is a board member with Colleges That Change Lives. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
Glad you can join us. And this is got to be an interesting time for you. We're early in April, which is typically a time when there's great celebration and activity on college campuses with students who've been admitted. They want to come see you and feel the love, and you want to show them lots of love, etc. But I'll bet it's quiet right now.
Very quiet. In an alternative universe, we were having our admitted student day campus program on campus last Saturday, and instead we had a virtual program from our living rooms. So it is a very different setup for sure.
So you're all pretty much working remotely then right now?
We are. Our office is working remotely. Our campus is quiet. We still have maybe about 20 students that are living on campus that couldn't go home for a variety of reasons, and they're being housed and cared for and well looked after on campus. But the offices are closed, the buildings are closed, and dining services are limited. So it is a very, very quiet campus. Still beautiful, but very quiet.
It's got to be
enjoying it the most is our resident campus cat.
But I mean, at a time when a campus can't look any better than the spring, all the flowering trees, etc. And you'd love to be able to show it off, but it just right now it isn't happening.
Exactly. I noticed our communications staff took some beauty shots and filmed some footage of campus with all the flowering azalea bushes and posted it on our Facebook page. So we can all enjoy it virtually, but it's just not the same, is it?
It's not quite the same. Well, I'm curious if you could kind of take me back 3 months perhaps or more to help me understand how this coronavirus phenomena began to emerge on the radar screens of the folks at Rhodes College. Probably from something that's way across the seas now, well, maybe it'll go away for them, to something that is suddenly in our faces. What's the chronology like for you guys?
Sure. I think one of the things that's so interesting is Rhodes is one of the few liberal arts colleges to be in an urban setting. So to be in Memphis, and working with our Memphis partners was a really important way for us to stay abreast of what was happening. Memphis is a bit of a medical mecca with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, and several other hospitals. And so our president has very good relationships with all of those leaders. And I feel like we were in tune with some of the news that was out there, maybe even a little bit more than your average Joe, if you will, because of that. So it was certainly something that was percolating, but as you know, as everybody knows that's listening, this happened very, very quickly. I think we were all assuming that everything was going to continue as normal, and we were just watching things on the news, and then all of a sudden during our students' spring break, our administration made the very difficult decision to switch to a remote learning process. And that decision, our president will tell you, and you can actually watch it in the news conference that she hosted, but Dr. Haas talked about this being certainly the most difficult decision of her career as a college president, but trying to find a very human-centered approach to making such a monumental decision for our students, for our faculty, for our staff, in really a vacuum. There was a lack of information from the national level to the state level. And so we were having to make some very courageous decisions about what that might look like and what would be best for our student and faculty and staff population as a whole. So it happened very, very quickly. I think there were several conversations behind the scenes with our board of trustees. We also brought in several alumni and Memphis connections again. In talking, we've got a former Surgeon General for the state of Tennessee who is a Rhodes alumna, and of course bringing in some of our public health experts from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And Dr. Hendra Rhodes is one of our public health equity professors, and she serves on an advisory board for one of the local hospital systems here in Memphis. So we had some great resources to try to navigate these very uncertain medical waters. But the decision was made while students were on spring break. We invited them to come back to campus the following week to clear out their residence halls and dorm rooms if they could. Again, allowing for as much flexibility as students needed to make that happen, including if they couldn't come back or didn't want to return until the end of the semester to clean things out, they certainly could do that. We extended spring break by a week to give our faculty a chance to figure out what remote learning looked like. Our IT staff won gold stars for the year and managed to pivot very quickly to a remote system, not just for our students and faculty, but for our entire campus community. And within 2 weeks, we were up and running and trying to create that same human and student-centered approach to education. I think one of the strengths of Rhodes is that we are such a relationship-centered community, and so we can build upon those relationships even when we're working remotely from each other.
It sounds like this is the spring break of 2020 is the one to remember.
For sure, absolutely.
Everyone will know where they were on spring break and what happened.
Everybody will know when they got the message from our campus about what the next steps were. It's one of those pivotal moments we can all remember. And I think we all thought in the admissions office, okay, our students are leaving campus, but we're still here. And so it will be difficult, but we were still welcoming visitors to campus for a little bit until the shelter in place order came through. And so for a while, we thought the biggest challenge would be welcoming visitors to an empty campus. And instead it became trying to encourage students to visit virtually instead.
Now, I'm curious, was it difficult or a great challenge for your faculty to pivot into the online for the balance of the semester? I mean, to me, and I don't mean to speak disparagingly of any faculty member at all, but faculty like to know things, operate in a certain way, and all of a sudden, when there is no choice but to turn 180 degrees or 150 degrees even from where they've been, that can be a bit jarring. But it sounds like a lot of faculty on campuses around the country just rallied tremendously. Is that what you saw?
They really did. I agree with you. But I think the spirit of these communities is that it was one of resilience. One of the things I think that was helpful was our Chief of Information Services had been kind of planning things in the background as soon as, I think honestly, as soon as the word pandemic was maybe mentioned in the news and even a remote possibility, they were starting to explore what does this look like. And so they were able to provide a list of resources for faculty to choose from. So not every faculty had to do the same thing, whether it was synchronous or asynchronous classes, Zoom meetings, one-on-one conversations. I mean, you talk to our music faculty, one of our professors still leads orchestra by Zoom, which I think is
oh my goodness,
tremendous. To our art faculty, figuring out what does studio art look like in a virtual setting. And so it really is interesting how creative students and faculty have been. And I think, again, they're building on those relationships. I'm not sure how schools that don't have that setting to build upon, that foundation to build upon, are making that pivot quite so quickly. I feel like for us, you might have a group class meeting, but then you've got the opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with your professors because your average class size is only 14. And so professors can do that individual outreach and make sure that students are cared for and well supported, both emotionally and academically for the rest of the semester.
You talked about finding creative solutions. I would imagine that those of you involved with the admitting and enrollment process have had to kind of take a step back and imagine what this is going to look like. I mean, you probably were all set to release, maybe you had already released decisions when things started to get really tight.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do anything in this decision-making process to expand, let's say, the offers of admission? Do you anticipate waitlist activity? How are things working from your end on the enrollment side?
Great question. We had already released our regular decisions, so all of our decisions were out the door when this happened. Well, actually, that is not true. Let me just think about it. That is not true, because one of the things we changed is that normally Rhodes places a great amount of emphasis on demonstrated interest.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that we will oftentimes even defer or waitlist wonderful candidates for admission purely on lack of demonstrated interest. And we decided not to do that for our regular decision pool. So I'm trying to think about the timeline. It was just before, about a week before decision release date, and we decided to do that because we knew normally a student who has been waitlisted for lack of demonstrated interest is encouraged to visit campus and take advantage of on-campus opportunities as well as virtual opportunities. And we knew that that might be more difficult for families to think about. And so we took that off the table. So we did change a little bit about those admission decisions just before they went out the door. And then we were still working on campus at that point in time, but it was a quiet campus already because it was spring break. And so we did make a few changes in that respect. And then certainly having to pivot our visit opportunities to a virtual visit. And we had to work very quickly to do that. One of the things we've been asking for was a virtual tour for a couple of years now. Sure. And all of a sudden our communications team was on it like that because we recognized it was so important for students to be able to virtually experience campus as much as they could.
Well, in addition to the virtual tour, are you finding that you need to replace some of the other traditional touch opportunities, if you will, with admitted students with more, what do I want to say? Remote or virtual?
Absolutely. Our campus visit team switched from having an on-campus scholarship symposium and one big admitted student day program to holding virtual only events. We have 3 admitted student virtual programs over the course of this spring. Our multicultural and inclusivity program, which is usually an overnight program on campus, has also been turned to a virtual program as well. We've always done something called Phonecast, which is sort of like a call-in radio show by phone. And so that has been lauded by a couple of our families as a great opportunity for students to listen to current students and ask questions live. Although that's something we've always done, I think families are paying more attention to those kinds of opportunities now than maybe in years past. We've started hosting we try to do our outreach to high school counselors and independent counselors as well. So we've hosted a multitude of counselor coffee hours for regions around the country. And one of the side benefits, I think, to all of this is we've also been able to host more admitted student receptions in different geographic locations than ever before. Usually we were limited by time and travel and distance and finances for hosting some of those admitted student receptions, and now we can host them all over the country. So I am traveling, if you will, and I use that in quotation marks, but to Hawaii tomorrow for an admitted student reception, which normally I would never actually be stepping foot in Hawaii in April. So we're trying to take advantage of connecting our admitted students with as many current students and faculty and staff and alumni and current parents as possible virtually.
There's an opportunity for you now to demonstrate the value, and perhaps this admitted student program with the folks in Hawaii virtually done might lead to something more present in the future.
To your mouth, to our traveler coordinator's ears, I hope.
Yeah, there you go. Are you dealing differently with enrollment deadlines, enrollment deposits, in light of what's going on right now?
We had an interesting conversation in our office about that because I know some schools have moved to a later deadline, and I think Rhodes continues to try to work with students as much as possible, but we also recognize that this year's senior class in many ways wants to have this process completed. And if we thought that moving to a later deposit deadline would give students the opportunity to visit campus and experience it for themselves, we might consider changing to a later deposit date. At this point, that doesn't look possible. And so for now, we are sticking with a May 1 deposit deadline. But certainly welcome conversations for any students who are seeking extensions. But we understand that people want to wrap this up as well and try to make that decision and not have it drag on further.
I would imagine, though, that there are bound to be different ripples on this. Obviously, the health crisis is one thing, and just as big as the economic crisis that follows, and then with that come the perhaps more local conversations between parents and kids, saying, well, we're going to send you to Tennessee, but why don't you stay home or stay closer to home for the time being so we can keep an eye on things. I would imagine predicting yield is just, all the models you have gone out the window.
That is very true. All the models have gone out the window. They still seem to provide numbers, but we have no faith in anything that they say because most of us can't predict what tomorrow is going to bring, right? And other than maybe staying at home and wearing pajamas. And so I do think that it is particularly tricky. I think that this will be a blip for all future years as well when we're trying to predict things in years to come. The thing that we're trying really hard and have always tried really hard is to be student-centered in this process. And so we are counting on this individual person-to-person outreach that our admission counselors are able to do with each admitted family to see where they are in the process and see who do they need connected, who do they need to speak with, who do they want to be connected with, what will help provide that sense of additional information and comfort and in making their college decision. So I think it is certainly challenging. College admissions has always been a field full of challenges and opportunities, and this year is certainly no exception. But we are trying very hard to be mindful of family circumstances. I think you're right. I think the financial piece is going to affect all of us. Certainly we're having conversations now with seniors about financial aid packages, which we would always expect in April leading up to a May 1 deadline, but now there's more uncertainty than ever before with job security and savings and the market. So we're trying to help families as much as we possibly can think through and making sure financial fit is part of their ultimate college decision. And I think this will have an effect in future recruitment cycles as well. The average Rhodes student is about 450 miles away from home when they come to Rhodes. And so most of our students are coming from further away. And we want to make sure that they feel comfortable with the idea of still exploring a new part of the country, a new city. We think that's our biggest strength of being Rhodes in Memphis. And so we're still looking for students who are enthusiastic about that Memphis experience. And it's going to take some conversations, I think, to find students and make sure that they feel comfortable with that kind of distance from their families.
You'd mentioned the financial piece, and there are certainly going to be families, parents in particular, who felt maybe 3 to 4 months ago that, yeah, college is expensive, but we've saved, we figured it out, we've got this. Or we've had the conversations that suggest that whatever we need is going to be there. 2 weeks ago, that went out the window for a lot of families, and I would imagine that you're starting to hear some different kinds of conversations apart from the normal. Well, I got X amount at another school and Y amount at your school. Can you match it? This is going to be perhaps a different scale of renewing the conversation with families that weren't even on your radar before. Assistance. Is that something that you've talked about much?
It is. It's something we've talked about. It's something that I think we have to kind of work through on a student by student basis, as we always have. Again, the strength of being a smaller school with smaller numbers is that we really can have those personal conversations with families. And so after an admission decision is released with a financial aid package, our admission staff calls every single admitted student to see what questions they have and to walk them through their financial aid package and see what kinds of questions they have, because we know that financial aid can oftentimes be a confusing part of the process. We're renewing many of those conversations now and checking in with families to see what questions are on their minds. And some of it is just a whole lot of uncertainty that we are all grappling with. We do have a process in place to have those kinds of conversations. And I think for some families, I spoke with one yesterday, who said, we're not asking for more for the entire 4 years, maybe just a little bit more to help out for the first year until things kind of get back into and resettle and back into a new normal. Those are the kinds of individual conversations that we're capable of having given our volume.
Mm-hmm.
The other nice thing is for our current students, they're struggling with financial uncertainties as well. And the great thing about Rhodes and most of our institutions is those financial aid office doors never close. Just because you've enrolled as a student doesn't mean you can't continue to have those kinds of conversations as financial circumstances change.
Sounds like you're just doing a wonderful job of making sure that you eliminate as much of the uncertainty and create a more comfortable decision-making paradigm for families. And that's a good thing. Good stuff.
We're trying.
Well,
Process is so stressful and so uncertain
yeah.
for families, even without the pandemic. And I think adding that into the mix, we're all trying to navigate these waters with as much grace and compassion as humanly possible.
And good for you. Do you get the sense, though, that this could be a year where the enrollment process writ large kind of extends through the summer, that it's, whereas we normally would like to see the class really well defined by the start of June, now it might be the middle of August. And to follow up on that quickly, even before the coronavirus issue became big for us, there was a lot of speculation about how the Department of Justice actions relative to admission deadlines and respecting and enrollments the students might have made at one school. Colleges were being previously admonished against poaching, if you will. Do you see that this has kind of created an environment for maybe freer movement of families from college to college after the process is presumably over?
Possibly. I hope not. I hope students ultimately are making a decision that they are really excited about and that they're able to commit to a college and join into that community as soon as they make that deposit. I know Rhodes and so many of our peer institutions have such a welcoming environment. We've tried very hard to create a robust onboarding process, if you will, for our incoming students. And so as soon as you've made that deposit, we want you to feel like you're part of the Rhodes family. From sitting down with an advisor to choose your classes individually on a one-on-one basis, to wearing your Rhodes t-shirt and swag with pride, to meeting new friends and connecting with roommates. And so I think now it's more important than ever. And this is something that we discussed as soon as the DOJ ruling came out, and we knew that there was a possibility of more movement over the course of the summer. We really have worked hard and have been mindful of the fact that we want to make sure students don't want to leave once they've made that decision, even before they physically step foot on campus. And so I think while the ruling created some uncertain times in our profession, the silver lining, I hope, is that colleges made more robust efforts to fold those students into the community as soon as they possibly could. Because again, you're making a college decision to make a college your home, and we want you to feel great about that decision, no matter where it might be. So our hope is that we won't see too much movement over the summer. Our hope is that once you've committed to Rhodes, you've committed to Rhodes because you love the community that we have, you're excited about the academic opportunities, you've already connected with faculty and staff and future classmates, and why would you want to leave that home? So our hope is that some of those things that we set into place pre-COVID-19 at the impetus of some of those DOJ rulings is that will now serve us well over the course of the summer. But I do expect, certainly as students, as international students are dealing with travel bans and visa issues and trying to figure out when and where they might be able to start, and students that are looking to transfer kind of figure that out later in the game, I expect there'll be some more movement this summer. But my hope is everybody that makes their college decision is excited about that one.
Well, and I think that's a viable hope, and good for you. Let's kind of shift gears here a little bit, because we've been talking about the impact of the current circumstances on the students who are trying to make enrollment decisions now. Um, you no sooner have that question answered than you need to be already fully engaged with the next class, the class of 2025. Have you and your colleagues begun to talk about what your recruitment regimen might look like during the second half of this year, when normally you'd be out visiting high schools, attending college fairs, college nights, maybe doing open houses, maybe some credential review sessions with families, all of which take you out into the world, into the community, and there's no certainty about any of that. What are you thinking at this point?
Mm-hmm. You're right, Peter. Normally we would be on the road at college fairs and we'd hardly have time to sit down and have this kind of conversation.
Exactly.
We are already excited to be recruiting the class of 2025 and beyond. We have our admission staff have already done several virtual high school visits and virtual junior night programs where we've done webinars and information sessions on choosing a college, busting myths and misperceptions about the college search, to financial aid and how to do a college visit virtually in your college search exploration. So we're certainly trying to provide that same kind of information on a virtual level that we would on a present level in previous years. Similarly, I think a lot of those counselor coffee hours that we're doing are the same kinds of outreach that we would be doing to high school and independent counselors and CBOs in the spring to help them put Rhodes on their students' radars if it's the right fit. And so we're trying to host those as well. In fact, I was meeting with a group of counselors this morning for coffee, and we started the conversation talking about the pandemic and COVID-19 responses and shifts in our process in our campus community for right now. And then someone virtually raised their hand through Zoom and said, well, I'm not all that familiar with Rhodes. Can you just tell me what makes Rhodes a great fit for students? And I thought, oh, how refreshing. I can just talk about my institution and share all the wonderful things that it means to be part of the Rhodes community. And so that was great, because I think it helped remind all of us on the conversation that juniors are still looking, and they're still stressed out about this college process, and we still need to help mitigate that as much as we can and provide as much information as we can. Some of the things that we're thinking about for our juniors, Rhodes has adopted a test optional policy for the next 3 years. So for the next 3 admission cycles, we know that sitting for an SAT or ACT might be tricky. And so we've removed that barrier for students who wish to be applying as a test optional student. We also recognize that high schools are doing all sorts of different things with grading scales. So we expect to see blips on transcripts spring semester of junior year. And we know that that's going to look different depending on the school. So whether it's pass fail grades or frozen GPAs, or they just stop school altogether, we'll try to review each transcript individually with as much compassion and understanding as we can, given the circumstances.
Sounds like this will be the year of the asterisk on the.
I think so. It will. But my hope is that the conversations with counselors are very much a two-way street, and we'll be able to fully understand what each student was going through in this process, because I do think it's going to look different from school district to school district and region to region.
Well, and I think that a lot of times students don't recognize how a holistic review process works. I mean, they, yes, are presenting an application with an essay, with an academic record, but the teacher recommendations, the counselor evaluations all help to sort of triangulate on the young person and give us a real three-dimensional sense of that person. Would you agree on that?
Absolutely. I think context is more important than ever before, but for holistic review, we've always paid attention to those extra pieces within an application. So the ability for the student to share their own perspectives, but also to gain insight from a counselor, from teachers, is going to be critical going into next year.
Will this be the year of the coronavirus essay?
Unfortunately, I think so.
Well, sadly, but and the reason I asked the question is that somewhere out there, there's a notion of taboo topics. I don't promote that idea, but you don't write about divorce or death, that kind of thing. And I would have well imagined that there are kids who are looking at their essays now and saying, well, I got to write about, no, that's a taboo topic. Everybody's going to do that. What do you think?
I think like any time, unfortunately, where we've seen different disasters around the country and around the globe, we always will see an influx in essays related to that topic. After Hurricane Sandy, I saw so many Sandy essays. After 9/11, I continue to see those. After Harvey, our Houston, Texas area admission counselor will tell you how many essays she saw. And so I think it's only natural when you've experienced something with this kind of impact that you want to share what that meant to you. So I imagine we will see an influx of COVID-19 related or quarantine related essays. I do think it's going to be a challenge for students to differentiate themselves if they choose that kind of topic. I think it will be very important for students, as it always is, to make sure the essay is incredibly personal and about their personal experience. Because this COVID-19 experience is a shared experience. That's something that our administration and professors have been talking about, that our incoming class is coming in to college, to campus, with this shared experience, with a greater sense of resilience, but also probably some baggage along with it. And that will change the way they experience a residential campus community and college life in general. I think the same is true for our high school students. You have this shared experience, and it's going to change the way you think about the world around you. And so for students who feel that it's important to write an essay about that, my word of advice is to make sure that it is very uniquely personal to them, because lots of people have shared in an experience around COVID-19. So how is it personal to you? And that will help differentiate your essay from others.
Oh, very good advice. I appreciate that. And let's take that a step further. Let's suppose you randomly encounter a 17-year-old, soon-to-be high school senior, who is obviously bewildered and a bit overwhelmed by what's going on in the world, and is confused about how the whole college process is going to work now. What advice would you give to that young person?
First, take a breath. Take a deep breath and try to let it bring in some calming influence, because this college search process has always been stressful. And I think schools like Rhodes and the colleges that change lives try to de-stress this process as much as possible. And when there are so many outside stressors in the world around us, it's more important than ever to just breathe. My advice beyond breathing and trying to have a moment of self-reflection is to take advantage of some of the opportunities that now exist that didn't before. So many colleges and universities have now created an abundance of virtual content that you can literally visit any college or university around the globe in a way that you've never had access to before. When I look at our virtual visit opportunities, our students can sign up to meet with an admission counselor, to attend an information session, to sit in on a virtual class, but also meet with 9 or 10 different staff members, meet with faculty members. And those visits are not just limited to our admitted seniors. They're open to anybody who's interested. So for juniors, take advantage of that now, because you would normally possibly be spending your spring break or summer months traveling around and visiting campuses physically on campus. You can still do that just in a virtual setting, and honestly have access to probably even greater resources than ever before to get a feel for student life and campus life. I would also suggest looking at how schools have responded to COVID-19. We've posted all of the letters that our president has written to parents of current students, to parents of admitted students, to our community as a whole, news conferences. Those things, if you start reading between the lines, are going to give you a context for the culture of a campus community. And that's really what you're trying to figure out in your college search, is the culture of a school. When you're stepping foot on campus, A lot of times I feel like students say, oh, I chose Rhodes because I stepped on campus and it just felt right. Well, you can get that same feeling if you start trying to understand some of that context of a culture. And I think there are more resources now that you can take advantage of than ever before. So if there's one silver lining, it's that to all of this, it's that there's a lot more content and a lot more opportunities to explore a culture of a campus, not just if your buildings are pretty or your dining hall serves delicious food.
So if I get all of that, you breathe, reflect, take advantage of opportunities to understand better what's out there, and believe in yourself.
Absolutely.
Yourself. Very good. As we wrap up, are there any resources that you'd like to present to our listening audience with regard to Rhodes, websites, web pages on websites that you believe would be useful as folks get to know the college better?
Please take a look at our virtual visit page. It's rhodes.edu/virtual visit, or it's a big red button when you log on to the Rhodes homepage. There are many opportunities. You can sign up for an individual virtual visit, but there are lots of programs and videos and links to concerts and Instagram pages that'll give you a sense of connecting with campus. And I also recommend clicking on the COVID-19 update link as well on our website so that you can see some of the letters that have gone out to our Rhodes community members to fully understand what Rhodes is doing and how we've tried to take the most human-centered approach to these circumstances. I think both of those are valuable. And I would be remiss if I didn't put in a plug for the Colleges That Change Lives website, ctcl.org. There's a college search engine, of course, on the website as well, but there are also just some great articles about finding the right fit and trying to de-stress and maybe humanize the college search process. So I encourage you to check out both the Colleges That Change Lives website and the Rhodes website through our virtual visit pages.
Great information. Thank you for sharing that with those who are listening. I want to thank you also for taking time from all of your Zoom meetings today. I'm sure that you've been overwhelmed by the new technology in your life, but thank you for sharing your thoughts and perspectives with us at this time when it's really important to understand how the process is working from the inside out. And thanks to those who've been listening, hopefully this has been a useful exercise for you as well. Thank you again. Until the next time, everybody be safe and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.